to improve their opponent.
You still could?
This class is
Oh, well, yeah, no, I thought it was a very good discussion. I thought we covered a lot of the main points. But I think that this high-level discussion stuff doesn't ring as true. It doesn't carry often as much as saying specifically,
Well,
and how would you do it? What would you do next time? Is there anything, a specific thing that you would do, right? Is there a specific thing that you want to do prior to the next one? And it's like, write it down and do it, right?
Yeah, the stuff that I wanted to get into,
well,
where we were going to go is a little bit more into direct. I wanted to take, really there's, when you're trying to beat your opponent, there's a couple of different approaches you can do it. You can go from a defensive standpoint, or you can go from an offensive standpoint. From a defensive standpoint, like you're looking to defend and counter, there are things you can do to facilitate putting your opponent in a bad position. But if you want to take from a more offensive standpoint, where you're pushing the attack, there are things you can do to put your opponent in a bad position. Those are areas that we're going to cover as far as various options you've got to see what your opponent, where you can make your opponent make mistakes, or where they're more likely to make mistakes that you can punish them for. And also I wanted to cover some of the more, some of the more creative stuff that actually ends up happening, and how you can set yourself up to be able to do some of that thing, do some of that sort of thing. Not sitting here trying to teach tricks or things like that, but being able to improvise on the fly.
That's sort of esoteric, and so, not to counter the logic on that, but it's valid and it's helpful. But I think that it's like saying, and cook a dinner. And so you can cook a dinner that's, a Mexican dinner, or you can cook an Italian dinner. But I think that if you say to somebody specifically, what you need to do is cut up an onion exactly like this, half a cup of onion, you pour it in the, if you give them certain instructions and then say, and then from here you can do different things, that brings, that's easier easier for them to catch on.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is a high-level discussion works for people that have enough experience to understand a high-level discussion. But most of the people that come into these kind of classes don't typically have the 8 to 10 years that you're typically going to need, is what I think that you're saying. Well, so what we need to do is bring the conversation down more into, we'll just call it the trenches, where I can actually apply what you're saying in a way that I understand.
Partially, but there's two things to it. It's like when somebody comes into a room and you can talk about food, or you can give them some. And so I think that what we've been doing today has been mostly talking about food. There are a couple little things that we threw in there.
But I think every time we've done this class, that's kind of what we've done is talk about it.
Exactly. And that's what I think has been needs to be improved, is that. So, so let's listen, pick up the flavor. And one of the things I think would be easy to shove in the class, maybe going forward, because we talk about these virtues and sins, but one of the main virtues is, there's 7, but a couple of the big ones are the, you hit on this, which is patterns of attack and stuff like that. If people are used to you doing, well, I'm not going to hit you clearly before I tap on your blade. So you set up that pattern, and then you block it, right? And you block it, and block it. Okay, now ready? You don't tap it, or you tap and you disengage. You throw in variety, what we call elements of chaos. It's what it is that you're establishing a pattern and breaking it. So if I always tap and then thrust, then you can use that weakness to your advantage by doing it and then doing something else. Instead of doing that, you can either not do it and just fight it, or you can tap, disengage under it, and kill. So you use your own characteristic attacks, patterns, against your opponent who's predicting that you're going to do that. And I think if we did that, if we took people in and fought them for like a minute, you could see those patterns that they're doing and then say, okay, stop right there. Now, this next time, right before you attack, do it and then do something else. Or if I always lead with a headshot, don't lead with a headshot, lead with the foot shot. Throw variety into it. So some of these things that we're talking about that I think are easier to translate into things that they can walk out of the class and go, I am better, is throwing combinations of shots rather than throwing one shot all the time. Sometimes throw one, sometimes throw three, sometimes throw two. Because what you're doing is you're throwing elements of chaos into the brain. You can't process it all. So if we come in here and we go, I'm going to throw how many shots? If you think I'm going to throw one shot and it's going to be at the foot, you're going to be able to defend against that and do something. If all you ever threw was the foot shot, eventually people would kill you. But then you come in and you go, feint to the foot, throw to the chest. You know, and then the next time you're going to go, feint to the foot, throw with the foot. So what am I doing? I'm throwing one shot, and I'm throwing two, I'm throwing one type of pattern, foot, chest, and then I'm throwing another one, foot, foot. And then you play on it from there.
So talking about what he's talking about, I don't tend to, you know, the make a pattern, break a pattern, don't throw 3 times in a row. I don't really follow that mentality. I don't really advocate it. What I do is I'll go out there and I'll throw one shot at primary areas that I need to see. What is Miguel doing today? How is he reacting? Because once I get his initial reaction, I've got his natural reaction. No preface, no pretense, no understanding what I'm doing. I've got what he's going to do today. And that's a key fact, is how is he going to react today? And I'll take that to set up moves much, much later. I mean, 10 or 15 moves later that I'll actually take advantage of, and I'll throw the same, a close enough attack that's semantically the same shot, so he'll react the same way so I can take advantage of it.
You find a hole in the fence, you know, particularly bad area.
I mean,
Find what is it like? Go dig with something else so they forget about the fact that they just made an absolute axe of that last dagger Harry, and come and make you do that dagger Harry didn't kill him.
Well, it doesn't have to be a weakness or hole necessarily, but if you know what their next move is going to be,
Exactly.
if it's a good move,
Well,
you can work with
Yeah, even if
that.
it's a good move, you got a good answer for it.
But if you know what their parry is going to be, then you throw the original shot, you throw the second shot that you know that they're going to parry in a certain way as a feint, you disengage at the last point, you throw somewhere else.
Something that's key to this is it's just not shots. It's not just offenses. You can almost wire in. You can actually figure out what their sequences are for a particular trigger. It's not just one move. It might be 2 or 3 deep. It depends on the fighter and it depends on the day. But if you can figure out their sequencing, you can actually enter, and this gets into the OODA loop stuff, you can actually figure out their sequence, get inside of it, and when you hit them, they never had a chance. It's what I call this goes. It's literally getting so far inside of their decision loop and their choices that they can't adapt to the changing situation of you didn't play my game, so to speak.
By getting inside the loop, do you mean you're basically aborting it, you're changing things so they don't have time to get all the way through this cycle before
Right.
you do something else?
The OODA loop is actually a cycle, which talks about, Colonel Boyd talks about the cycle time in there. So you're both, I mean, when I'm fighting you, we're both processing the information. And if I can get, due to training, into a loop where I'm processing more of the data more quickly, which really you can only do while you're continuously working on patterns and stuff like that, then I get within your loop. I know what you're going to do. You may not even know it. To Brendan's point earlier, I used to hit him in the head all the time because he had a bunch of different things, but he'd like pull his elbow back before he'd take a shot at me, so I hit him in the head. And so I was in his decision loop before he knew he was in his decision loop. So
I didn't even know I made a decision yet in most cases. I mean, seriously, I didn't realize that I was attacking. I think it's because he actually knocked it out, the choice out of my head, but that's...
So I would get within his decision loop to attack me and attack him in the middle. And so that's that cycle time. And so you can decrease your own cycle time by just minimizing telegraphs. You telegraphs with the double, right? And so other people's telegraphs give you that time to be able to get inside their circle.
I mean, what we'll do next time is actually take this, try to cover less material, but line out the specific material we want to cover and do a lot more practical with it, so they
Yeah.
actually got, you know, you've got the visual, in addition to getting the idea given to them, they've got this visual representation of it in some way. Like, I think, you may have been hitting on this, a minute ago, is get one or two people up here and let them fight for a minute or two, and everybody just watch. And see, you know, watch people pick up the patterns and start to see how they're functioning, and just use them as each other's learning tool. We don't want to get a bunch of people doing it, just have one group up here so you can see, you know, this is what they did. Oh, okay, yeah, it makes sense. This is what these guys are seeing. Let's start to understand that.
Either that, or we actually get up here and we do some of the things like, we'll get a volunteer from the crowd, and we get up here and say, okay, so here's one of the, we're going to go through the 7 deadly sins. I'm not going to tell you ahead of time, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do right now. And then do one of the virtues. One of the virtues is changing the area of attack. So, you go up there and you throw up your arm a couple times, and then you throw up your leg. Like, just that one variation confuses the brain. So then if you couple that and you can bring up the next person, maybe you do
Speed changes or something?
yeah, you do, and Modi's big into this. He talks about the energy states. Well, the energy state is, and there's two components to it, but one is how fast you're moving against your opponent. If your opponent's been used to you moving kind of slowly, so you get up there and you fight kind of slow for a little while. Maybe they think you're slow, and then you crank it up and you go faster. You can also do it the other way around, where I got hit so hard one time by thinking my opponent was faster than he was. He was this big, strong guy in a heavy field, and I went in, and he threw a shot, and I blocked it, and I went in to get him. I was fighting with blade, and he was fighting with sword and shield. Well, his shot had not landed yet. I misinterpreted how fast a human would be. His was much slower, and he was using the effect of a tree trunk, and he hit me in the hip with that tree trunk. And I was like, oh my God. And because it was a different speed than I had expected.
That's
So,
one of my standard tricks.
huh?
That's one of my standard tricks. I throw a shot and then hesitate for a fraction and wait to look very good.
Stutter shot?
And yeah, and now that's an off-timing shot, which is yet another one on here. You can actually do a speed, one speed all the way through slow, and then one speed all the way through fast. And then you can also do the stutters, which is it's an enhancement on that. But then you build them, and then you build these 7, and then say, look, each one of these 7 stutters or fades, speed changes, target changes, sequence changes. So if I'm always throwing, hand chest, and then I throw hand foot, or just chest, then it's a different sequence of attacks. So then what you do is you not only change one of these things, you can change multiple at the same time. So maybe the first time I come in and I blast you in the head really fast, and then the second shot I come in and I throw slow to the hand, a double feint to the chest, and hit you in the foot. It's a 3-shot combination that involves multiple elements of chaos into it. And so we can literally get people up here and show how much more effective 2 exact same fighters can be without training or anything else, but with just trying these different variations within the fight.
Let's do some math also.
Math?
I don't want to do math.
Okay. She said, let's think about the various combinations between, let's take it after 3 shots. You really don't want to take most attacks beyond more than take 3 shots. But 3 shots times the virtues, the combination, how many different iterations can we have of the 7 virtues being combined together within a series of 3 shots?
Can you,
So-
I think you're
You can.
It's
343.
Yes.
that's
It's really,
just based on that.
that's correct math, hold on. It's really not
So
that
they
many
are
because,
Some combinations are not really.
yeah, they don't play well. Like, some of them do, but I think if you said, look, there are roughly 50 different combinations you can get, easily by doing these things, that would be so much more complex and hard for one than one. 360, ideal, the third, fourth. But, not
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, the idea, the reason that, so however we want to word that, is to get across the notion that there's quite a few, there's a lot of different ideas and a lot of different options in attack, just based on those principles, attacking 3 times. There's a lot, there's so much you can do, there's so much creativity that's out there, that just, use it. Take these ideas and use them, play with them.
Something we might bring up is, I think learning to fight in 4 attack sequences. The problem that I have with 3 is most people have a memory of 3 moves deep. And so they can, a lot of problem that I see is that people never learn how to attack past 2 or 3. So that, because like I was fighting Crowley earlier in the situation arose where we were engaged for about 7 attacks. But your average person stops, that there's literally a wiring that makes them want to stop at a certain point, and they never learn how to push past it. And I think 4 can teach them that as long as you're
I
engaged,
think that would be good. I do this in heavy weapons sometimes. Like, I'll get in and I'll go, boom, 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 whack! Because they're like, block, 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 and I've just been hit in the back of the head.
Yeah.
And because it gets so patterned for them to do that. So here's the list: shot speed, foot speed, number of attacks, area of attacks, sequence of attacks, angle and timing of the attacks. And then there's a couple of others that I added on later, like a type of attack. But I think the number of attacks, area of attacks, and sequence of attacks, just those 3 are very, very powerful when put together. So it's 27 variations right there within those 3 that you can do. The very basic part. And then there's
well,
one.
I think we get the point across.
Yeah.
Without having to get overly complex with stuff they couldn't see.
There's actually one piece that, and again, just putting the numbers concept out there. One area that I don't think, that doesn't get actually drawn into that is those are the various possibilities, but look at the multiples of the possibilities, such as, area of attack. 1, 2, 3, let's cut it, cut me in quarters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
No, because you've got to go to the ones that are likely.
Sure, you can't go all the way out to
So
it.
it's really 1, 2, hand, chest, that's 4.
Well, and also, if you're going to go through this in class, you're also going to do ones that are super, super obvious for them to watch.
And the math, it's not just absolute true math, but that does add, it does have a variation to it.
But something, I think something like, as an example, shot speed change in the middle of a shot is something that you wouldn't be able to pick up from the side. You wouldn't be able to see that very likely. Most people would totally miss it. I think we have to focus on what you're talking about, which is the ones that are super, super obvious from the side.
Well, and then there's that other one too.
Can you videotape people fighting and then slow it down for the class?
That would be great. I think so. I think that this should be. I think we should just teach a class on that. That combined. I think the other stuff that's value. Do you guys like the other stuff?
I was just gonna say, everything you guys are talking about is great, but that needs to be a separate class.
Yeah.
And I think it would make a good separate class, but this mental game, things we're talking about, the energy, managing your energy, and how you go out in the field, your thought process, I think that's great for a mental game class. But combining the 2, you can see we went over, we had 2 hours?
Well, we were supposed to have had 2 hours, and this could have been quite a bit.
We got another 15 minutes still.
Yeah, part of this, we love to talk about this stuff when we get going.
Well, that's the thing is we got lines to spend. On the way to tournaments, we would ride together and we would talk about fighting all the way there and all the way back. So we forget practice. We would talk about fighting techniques and mistakes. We hadn't even gotten to this. We had not even discovered this at this point. But we would talk about some of the stuff that we were planning on using, some of the ideas that we had. We would talk about it for 10, 15 hours on the way there and back.
How do you talk for more than 5 minutes cussing? Okay, grab your blades and
Because we're both very good at visualization, so he would describe it being an attack, and so I would play it through in my mind, and I would play through, because I actually, what I enough that you can move. Past that point, it becomes a flash from here to here. There's no moving in between. So what I discovered was I actually there was a speed that I could visualize, so I could play through sequences, so I could find out what the holes in it were, because we would talk about this stuff and we would describe scenarios and we would go through. So, you know, tell me about your last fight with Modius, and I'm describing. He goes, what do you think you did wrong there? And I walk through and I go, at this decision point. I mean, the last time I lost to Shea, the last time, it was not the last time he won, it was when he won McKillop II. So, I had discovered that I could parry and repose and throw a super, super effective shot. So it was an offhand parry, so it was off body. This is back when we were fighting nothing, hardly anybody fought anything with open hand. But I discovered that when I threw it, if I committed too much to it, that I was exposing my chest. There was actually a decision, there was actually a moment in time when I knew if I had done it wrong. Well, we're fighting, and this is the semifinals, and I'm wanting it bad. And I come out there, and boom, 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 and I go parry, and I threw the repose, and as I throw it, I am so screwed. Because I had overextended, and I knew his defense was there, and I knew that my defense wasn't. I actually felt like I stopped because it was just a moot point. Because I saw the shot coming in, I was kind of like, I have nothing left. And it was actually, it was a very, it was a learning moment.
Yeah.
Because I've been working specifically on this shot, but I've been working on trying to not make this mistake. But, okay, you are what you practice. Whatever you practice is what you're going to bring to the tournament. What I've been practicing was the shot, but I haven't been working on that range portion enough. And so when I got to practice, I overcommitted. And when I overcommitted, it was over.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you didn't stop. I think it was one of those no things, because yeah, those two happened. I've been there, they're horrible.
And we were just talking about
You can just see it coming.
with just the right hand. Pick up your blade. Remember when I first came up with this come on guard?
Yes, I do remember when you came up with that.
I got to the point where I was having a lot of trouble beating Brendan, and I was like, and then I realized it's like, hey, he sticks his blade out there. So I did all of that.
So, even worse though, even worse, to come back out. He wouldn't just do it, he would actually come out there and he would do this.
Yeah.
He would sit there and go, and I was like, I can so get you in the chest. And about the time he hit me in the head, it's like, that sucked. And so what that taught me was, if you bait, you are going to die. So don't bait with anything that could possibly work. I mean, as an example, sticking your foot out there, you're going to get hit in the foot. If you stick your foot out there and they can't reach it, it doesn't matter. But baiting with something that is actually tangible, something that can actually hit, eventually you are going to get hit with it.
But if you bait with something.
Yeah,
That's one of the reasons when I throw my foot shot, that's one of the reasons that when it's thrown, it looks like this.
Yeah.
It's because
What was your first one?
If you bait with something that can't possibly work, they're not going to go for it. Unless
Exactly.
it's in
Well,
the
so let's say two things. One, I don't like to bait because you get in it.
yeah.
But the people that do bait do really bait with things. So I guess the statement is, if you're going to bait, you have to bait with something that's real, and then you're likely to get hit. Do some people pull it off? Absolutely.
But I think it's who is successful against it. It's important.
Yeah.
You're not going to go out to a Manila and bait with your knee and not get hit in the knee. So, I mean, what that tells you is some of these tricks work, and these are tricks.
And that's why I don't like baits. It's a personal preference that a bait is, to me, and this is just very me personally, I think it either says, one, you need a trick to get them to do something so that you can try to hit them. Because you're trying to take a shortcut. It's smart, it works sometimes. You can't argue that it works. I mean, But the other thing is that some people carry it off as, you can't hit me. And it's an arrogance that plays poorly. So like if you use it against somebody who's at your level or above, then, okay, well you're giving them something and it's fun and all that, you give it against a newbie, and they're like, hey, hit me, oh you can't, boom, punch you. It's just, it can't appear as a poor.
To me, it comes across to
Who are you trying, the thing is, who are you trying to be? If it's, generally the top end fighters, I'm not gonna fall for that crap. If I've got somebody who's obviously baiting me, I'm probably gonna actually throw something to get them, from taking the bait, take the shot they're gonna try to kill me with, pick it up and then kill them. That's generally how I do it, as opposed to actually taking the actual bait shots. It's like, okay, oh, thank you, boom. That's generally how I take it. And most good fighters are going to smoke that leg and do something similar to that. Really good fighters, you shouldn't eat it.
Well, and then I think the other thing about the bait is that, so let's say that if you bait with your foot forward, expecting them to throw for the foot, then they could then use that against you to feint for the foot, expecting your counter, and then counter
Most
off.
baits have an obvious
Yeah,
counter.
yeah, because there's,
I need this opening so I can close it
Yeah,
that way.
exactly. Yeah. If I'm like this, you know that they're going to throw for your chest and you're going to parry in. So if I throw for the chest and you disengage under,
we're not buttons.
Well,
We're an all county shot works effectively too.
Yeah.
You have to make it look
you're stuck.
unintentional.
Yeah, exactly. And how many people can get that carry on? Most people come up with a good one and they use it against everybody. You're like, ah. Oh, I know that one. So I think that I like the splitting the class apart, doing the high-level mental stuff, strategy, and the pre-prep, pre-training preparations and the pre-tournament preparations, or the pre-bout preparations is one thing, and then getting into the meat and potatoes.
And do the practice.
And
Tell me this is what you're saying, or if this is a different concept. I think what you're saying is break apart the loop, the mental concept of not getting into the actual fighting techniques, the virtues and all that kind of stuff. Condense that down so basically we can do that in about an hour. And then probably do the 7 virtues and all that stuff.
Yeah,
All the hands-on.
I think it's 4 hours. I think it's 2 hours for the discussion and the mental game, because I thought it was a good discussion, and we weren't even through.
Oh,
yeah.
we could talk for 10 hours.
But what all are they going to get out of it? So I think it needs to be more interactive and say, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You don't have to tell us, but ideally it'd be better. Like beforehand, say, if you're coming to this class, we will ask you these questions. So you may want to think about it.
Something to think about is what order, because there's advantages to doing either one first.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know that.
Try runs and see what the students think works better.
Yeah. But I definitely want to get to the part where we're showing stuff, because right now it's all esoteric, and they're like, yeah, that sounds interesting, but they're not putting it in.
I'm going to throw this out there because I think it's a good idea. So one of the gripes about this class, from a coordinator's perspective, has always been, you want to take a jar of life, and we're like, that's what we need. I mean, there's no way around it.
That's what it needs to actually cover material.
What do you think about doing this at more of an ENS event where there's no regular classes to go up against?
Yeah, King's College.
What about,
As an example, King's College,
what about regional fighter practice?
or
Like the one that you,
The thing with the regional, I mean,
most of the people are there to fight.
yeah, they're there to fight unless we want to,
yeah,
we can,
But I think there's a
I'm
good,
going to get some of my living room.
Well,
That works.
I think that the latter part would work fine, because we're there for fighting, and that would be a direct fight-to-fight kind of thing. The earlier part of it would be, or we could set it up as three 1-hour classes. And if you want to know some pre-training preparations you can work on, come there and we'll talk specifically about what you can do. If you want to know tactically what you can do.
I don't know if we don't tend to stay focused very well. We tend to,
I think we want to stay on it.
we tend to go off, we tend to go off on tangents a lot.
I think we got an outline that we all had. I think that would be either for
fits into King's College, and would get a particularly good draw from a rapier.
It also is not, it's not a rapier class. It's just a fighting class. If somebody was coming here off fighting, it's all relevant. Shot speed, foot speed, number of attacks, area of attacks. I'll tell you, that's exactly what I use in the heavy.
Fighting is fighting.
Boom, boom, snap.
Yep.
Boom, boom, thrust. Thrust, snap, snap. You know, I mean, it's all combinations. High, low, low, high, high, double ups. You know, in heavy, and actually, because there are more shot types in heavy, it actually works. It's even more interesting in heavy. Cross.
So you're on the long three-dimensional.
Or cut and thrust.
Yeah, well, because it's mostly heavy, right? So you do thrust and strikes and draws. And, well, I guess you don't have draws in heavy, so that's a different.
You don't usually do the cut and thrust either. If you
Oh.
inside in there, you whack them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, if it's good enough to be a draw for it, you make a draw cut and
Go ahead and hit it.
You're attacking us.
I think it's a shot.
And that's
Your thrust and, yeah.
and that's another one too, is one to know when to change your range, which is one of the virtues, is changing distance and angle of attack. And if you change an angle of attack, is it still, and your distance, is it still prudent to do a thrusting type attack? The answer is no. And I mean, it's obvious to everybody, but if you train that, you can actually train some of these things in place. So if I know that I rush in at Brendan like this, well, he might defend against it here, but if I step to the side and draw, then that's got a different advantage to it. He's expecting if you do thrust a lot and then throw in a different type of attack. Yeah, I've changed the angle, which you now have to adjust to, and then will you actually adjust to maybe throwing it?
And the shot style, for lack of a better way to call it,
Yeah.
that can throw a wrench in the game.
Shot style.
The draw versus the thrust.
Yeah, it's a type. I call it a type of attack. And so in heavy, it's thrust, snap, route, and spin for me.
Okay.
So, and they all have the